Welcome to Profiles with Jason Patterson. Thanks for joining us as we reflect upon the remarkable journey and extraordinary life of former professional catcher and Lindenwood Hall of Famer, Tim Nihart. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. There's a plaque on a wall at the Red Owens Big League Baseball facility in Easley, South Carolina, which bears your name. It's a memory, it's a snapshot of your earliest days in this game. Take us back there to the upstate of South Carolina and Easley in particular, when your formative years were being carried out and you were able to grow to love this game known as baseball.
Well, Pat, I grew up with the game of baseball, baseball in my hand, a glove in the other. And when I didn't have a baseball and a glove, I had a bat in my hand. And it really started, my legacy really started with my family. My dad was instrumental in teaching me the game of baseball. And at an early age, I played the game. I had an older brother, Lynn. And we always was tossing the pill. And so through that, I just really started to have a great passion and a love for the game and learning how to play the game. And that was really my early years in connecting with the baseball arena in Easley, South Carolina. Started to play with a lot of great teammates along the way.
What were some of those main memories that you carry forth from those early days in the game, Coach?
Well, it was really just the learning of how to play the game, and learning how to run the bases and learning how to keep your eye on the baseball so that you could hit the baseball and have contact. And it was really, for me, it was instrumental for me in my mental development because it helped me with focus. As I was focusing and learning how to focus on the game of baseball and learning the techniques of the game of baseball, it also helped me as a student in the classroom do a little better in my studies. And I just love the game of baseball in every avenue. And I think we'll be able to dig into more of how baseball paralleled with other areas of my life. As I grew in the game of baseball, it started to really help me learn how to grow in the game of life.
What do you think were those qualities of the game itself that so attracted you to baseball?
The game of baseball at an early age taught me discipline, how to really learn how to be consistent in executing a proper mechanic over and over and over again. And then it also taught me perseverance. When you get to that place where you feel like you can't go anymore, when you get to the place where you feel like, hey, I'm at my end, I'm at my max, perseverance tells you, hey, listen, you've only really gone about 60, 70%. You've got about 30 or 40 more percent to put forth. And so at an early age, the game of baseball really taught me discipline and how to unpack that and to allow that discipline to grow. And then it also taught me perseverance.
We're fighting through some storms tonight. I'm sure our viewers can hear, both outside there at your house as well as here at the studio. Life is not without its storms. What has your life in the game taught you about the way you handle adversity and those storms in life?
There's a lot of different ways that you can possibly struggle in the game of baseball. But I always took it and always focused in on, as long as I did not give up and as long as I continued to work hard and strived to do better, do even better the next time out, whatever that better may look like, I never took it as a failure. And I've taken that same philosophy in the game of life as well. So as long as we do not give up, as long as I do not give up, we can continue to embrace the day and learn from the day and seek to get better.
What an incredible lesson, as you said, not only for what happens in the game of baseball, but also what happens in the game of life. Looking back on those early days before we get into your playing career in college and your Hall of Fame career at Lindenwood and then your professional career, who were some of those individuals that shaped you? Who were the heroes that you looked up to and those that maybe you tried to take some things from their lives and apply them to yours?
For me, I always looked to my dad. My dad was the person that was in the household that I really looked to for character and integrity and the work ethic. My dad had an amazing work ethic. My dad went to work every single day and worked hard. and he worked hard all his life. And so my dad uh, was a big part of my work ethic and how to every day's a work day, and you get up and you go to work, and whatever that looks like. My mom was instrumental as well. I really learned from my mom and dad and their work ethic and how hard they worked each day, and that really helped me in my early days and throughout my whole life of connecting with that type of approach and just going out to seek to get better every single day. At an early age, I accepted Lord Jesus Christ in my life, and so throughout my early playing days, when I started to really develop as a player, I really connected with Jesus Christ and the strength that He gave me, and my prayers and my communication with Him. And so the Lord blessed me with two amazing parents, my mom and dad, and then He blessed me with the Holy Spirit when I accepted Him into my life when I was 11 years old. That really was a guide for me when I was on the playing field and wherever I was.
Faith, obviously, such a big part of your life as you're sharing with us now. Talk about specifically how that translates into your playing days. Talk specifically about how your faith and the strength of it has translated into who you've become as a man over the years.
Well, like you mentioned before, the game of baseball and the game of life has its ups and downs, and it has its struggles. And I tell you, with a true confidence, to have a true, real confidence embedded within you, uh, helps. I found has helped me work through those struggles on the baseball field and off the baseball field. And my true confidence comes from Jesus Christ. And so just having that confidence and that faith really made me internally strong and mentally strong, because as you know, the game of baseball is a mental game, as most sports are. You lose it between the ears, and I always call the little hamster upstairs. You lose that little hamster and it gets off the wheel, it can come crashing down pretty badly in the game of baseball or in the game of life. And so my confidence was really built when I truly started to understand that no matter what, having Jesus Christ and accepting Him into my life to be my Lord of all lords and King of all kings, I was automatically proclaimed a winner for life, but more importantly, a winner for eternity. And that confidence is untouchable. And so that was the confidence that really motivated me and inspired me and strengthened me to continue to persevere, continue to go out each day and seek to get better from one day to the next. And that allowed me, with a decent amount of athletic ability, to really beat out a lot of players, teammates, so on and so forth, that probably had a better talent than myself.
What are the other elements in your view of that mental toughness that it takes to be successful, not only in baseball, but in life?
I really believe that vision is a big part of the mental toughness. What do you see? How do you see it? Are you actually looking at or receiving what you're actually, your perception of what you see, and starting to break that down? And so I always taught my players when I coached that, listen, open your eyes, keep your eyes open, and don't not only keep your eyes open with your teammates when you're on the field, because you can kind of start to have some communication, some nonverbal communication, just through proper eye contact with your teammates, that they may say with eye contact, hey, listen, this is where we're going to go, and so on and so forth, or hey, I'm going to kind of take a couple steps over here or a drop step here, and you kind of follow me, and so on and so forth. But I also encourage my players to keep your eyes on your opponents, because your opponent will at times give away their next move. And if you're not seeing them and you don't have that correct vision, then you're missing some pretty important intel on what they're going to do. Because if you know what they're going to do, then you can counter that. And so I really found along my journey on the playing field as a player, as a coach, and off the playing field, that vision is crucial.
You talk often about baseball being a game of pace and how important it is not allowing the game to speed up on you. Can you dive a little deeper into that for us and talk about how it also is a good principle for everyday living?
Well, a lot of your viewers might have heard of the phrase "timing is everything." That's been around for a long time. But what does that mean? Timing is everything. Well, timing and tempo and the pace of the game, and I'll go one step further. The pace of life is crucial to. I found in my life to always stay in control. Always stay in control of the pace of the game or the pace of life's journey. And a lot of us at times, and myself included, we may feel along the journey that we don't have control of the pace. When it's all said and done, we actually do, with the mental toughness, with vision, with perspective, we can control the tempo, we can control the timing, we control the pace of life. In the game of baseball, the pace is crucial. I learned that as I've been able to go through the Little League, to high school, to college, and to the professional ranks. I learned at every level that the pace got faster and faster and faster. As I have the opportunity to travel the globe and speak to groups about leadership and effective communication, one of the questions that I always get from the audience when it gets to that Q&A time is what was the difference between each level that you had the opportunity to play in the game of baseball? And I always answer that question with the pace of the game. From Little League to high school, you better believe the pace got faster. The ball moved faster. You better believe from high school to college, the baseball moved faster. And from college to the professional ranks, if it's A ball or double A or whatever level, the game continued to get faster. The baseball continued to move faster. And if you didn't keep up with that pace or learn how to control that pace, then the baseball was going to be on you before you knew it. And most of the time, it made you look not so great if the ball got on you without you being prepared for it. And so I'll take it one step further. Just like in the game of life, if we're not protecting our pace and managing our life properly with tempo, with proper pace and timing and speed, the game of life can get on you pretty quick and chew you up and spit you out.
Let's talk about the journey through some of those levels that you just walked us through. It started with a trip to Limestone College. When you think about legendary figures in baseball from the Carolinas, Gaylord Perry is certainly on the short list. He comes to mind. He was at Limestone at the time, and you accepted an offer to play for Gaylord Perry.
That was really the first time in my baseball career that I started to become a prospect. Started to become someone, a student athlete that could actually grow into moving into a professional realm. Just the experience with Gaylord Perry, he taught me so much. He was a pitcher when he played. I was a catcher. And so I caught Gaylord Perry a lot through some mock scrimmages, and he just taught me, sat beside him a lot or right behind him on the bus and as we traveled around. And I just soaked up every little thing he said. And so I really believe I received a lot of amazing instruction on how to incorporate proper techniques and how to carry oneself as a professional. I received a lot of amazing advice from Gaylord Perry.
Well, everybody's thinking, what was it like to catch the Hall of Famer? Walk us through some of those moments where you felt the pop of his delivery in your mitt, or maybe I should say in terms of Gaylord Perry, the movement of the baseball and your ability to keep up with it.
Well, he could put the ball wherever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and so it was really easy to catch Gaylord when he wasn't throwing the fork ball or the ball that danced a little bit. If it was the knuckle or whatever you want to, whatever label you want to put on the ball, I'll tell you, it moved. And so when he wanted to make that ball spin, he could make it spin. And when he wanted the batter to feel good about themselves and really get the bat head on the ball and hit the ball, he would allow that to happen. But when he wanted to make somebody look a little goofy, he could do that as well. So he was in total control of what he was doing on the mound, and that's what I really learned from him most of all. Whatever he did, he was in control of what he exported. And I was so impressed with that, with where he wanted to throw his pitches, to if he wanted to give some great confidence to a player, a batter, and let him just put it in his wheelhouse to let him, hit it during batting practice. Or if he wanted to give some humble pie to a player, he could do that too. Whatever he wanted to do with that baseball in his hand, he did.
If you had to say one thing that translated from your time with Gaylord Perry that ended up shaping you as a head baseball coach, what would it be?
Just staying in control of the game. Gaylord was always in the game mentally. He always knew what was going on. Mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, he was always in the game with all senses. And he was always in control of what he had control over. And so I was always impressed with that. So I always did my best as a coach to always have the practices planned out and properly. The students, student athletes, the players, they knew what type of practice it was going to be. It was always charted. It was always effectively communicated. And then just being in control of the practices and being in control of the games and being in control of what we actually had control over, or I actually had control over as a coach.
Gaylord's time ended at Limestone College. You worked your way into the St. Louis area at the Lindenwood University. Turned out to be a very good decision for you. I think in 2007, you were inducted into their Hall of Fame because of what happened during your playing days there. Take us back to Lindenwood. Walk us through a memory or two that you have that stands for a lifetime from that era of your life.
Well, I'll have to give a shout out to one of the coaches that mentored me the most throughout my whole career, and that's Dr. John Ward. And Dr. John Ward was at Limestone for a short amount of time. And then, a couple years later, I was able to team back up with him in St. Louis as he was the head coach of the Lindenwood Lions in St. Charles, Missouri. And he taught me so much about work ethic. He taught me so much about perseverance. He taught me so much about the mental part of the game of baseball. And then he taught me so much about and just encouraged. He was always encouraging me every single day to get better and better and better. And he was one of few people in my life that had true confidence that I could move past the college ranks into the professional ranks and actually play above college ball. And I'll never forget the confidence that he had in me and the way that he always encouraged me that I was going to have the opportunity to have a shot of playing at the next level. And so Dr. John Ward was instrumental to my development in my later college days and my time in pro ball. But it was an honor to play for the Lindenwood Lions. It was a great opportunity. And you really never hear of a Southern boy moving to the Midwest to play baseball, but I did it, and it was a great. It was one of the pinnacle points in my life. I would say that when I moved out to St. Louis to play with the Lindenwood Lions.
All-American status. We talked about the impact that it had on your life. Of course, you end up, your wife comes from the St. Louis area, so that's a part of the country that's very kind to you. What were your takeaways from your time in the Midwest as an upstate South Carolina native?
Well, I fell in love with the city of St. Louis, all its history, and just really fell in love with the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. They have a great chapter out there, and so I know not only I worked for the university and was a student athlete at the university. I was also connected to radio. St. Louis has a great market for radio and television, and so that was my major in college. I was a mass communication student, and so I had the opportunity to rub some elbows with some amazing radio folks out there and television folks, and it was just a great experience. And once again, I'll say it was a pinnacle point of my life, not only as an athlete, but as a student, because I learned a lot in both areas and really forged a lot of friendships and I really also had the opportunity to connect with some professional players that were actually playing in professional baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals at the time. And just the time that I spent with them, with working with them through the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, they also instilled in me even more information of how to continue to get better as a student athlete. And so my time out in St. Louis was priceless.
You land in the Twins organization in pro ball as a catcher. How did that all transpire?
1994, I started my professional career. I graduated that same year, and supposedly I was supposed to get drafted that year. And so I waited by the phone and waited by the phone, and the draft came and gone and left, and never got the phone call. And so right after the draft day, I started to get all these phone calls from big league clubs inviting me to workouts. So for some reason, I wasn't drafted. I got left out. And so I actually I jumped in my little Nissan 200 SX, little hatchback, 5-speed, and I started to take all the invites that was offered to me. And so I actually worked out with 12 big league clubs at their facilities, and 9 out of the 12 said, "Hey, listen, Nihart, we're going to sign you. We want you. We're going to sign you. We just got to move some things around, and once we move them around, move some players around, we're going to sign you." Well, 1 week came, 2 weeks came, no phone call, and so I was actually filling out my application to go to the police academy, because that was my next dream, was to be a police officer, highway patrol officer. And the day before I was going to turn my application in, the Minnesota Twins called me. Ricky Taylor, a scout that was running the Kentucky and southeastern area. And Ricky Taylor, he said, "Hey, Nihart, we finally found a spot for you, man." He says, if you can be up in Elizabethton, Tennessee tomorrow, we'll sign you. We'll give you a week to kind of get your body back in shape, and then we'll give you the invitation to come into spring training with us the next year, and you can finish out the year with the Elizabethton Twins. And he says, "Would you like to do that?" And I said, "I sure would," And so I packed up my 200 SX Nissan, and then off I went to Elizabethton, Tennessee. And when I got there, I walked in, and it was just a dream come true. It was a neat little Appalachian town, bottom of the Appalachian Mountains, and it was just amazing 9 days with the Elizabethton Twins. I only lasted 9 days with the Elizabethton Twins there in that beautiful setting, and I saw about 500 people come into the stands every night, and I was so excited. I was only supposed to be there as a backup catcher, and to my surprise, I found myself being in the lineup more and more and more, and I didn't really understand what was going on. I was only supposed to be there as a backup, maybe get in a game or two here and there, finish the season with the Elizabethton Twins, and then be invited to spring training the next year. But I finished up a game, and I remember getting called into the manager's office, and I was thinking to myself, man, after 8 days, I'm getting released already. This is crazy. And the manager told me, he said, "Nihart, got good news for you. We've had some scouts down here watching you play, and they want to promote you up to play with the Fort Wayne Wizards in Fort Wayne, Indiana." So he told me the Fort Wayne Wizards, that ball club was actually on the road, and they were working their way back to the stadium. So I was going to just hang out with the Elizabethton Twins for a day or two, and then I would be shipped up to the Fort Wayne. So yeah, my start of my career was an 8-day, 9-day short trip with Elizabethton Twins, and I got promoted to the Fort Wayne Wizards. And so it was pretty it was a pretty amazing opening to my baseball career, professional baseball career, and then to learn that that's how my career was going to play out for me, where I had the opportunity to be with teams for a very short amount of time, and got to see a lot of different levels and be with a lot of different teams as I went up and down in the organization.
So Fort Wayne, you mentioned, you spent some time in Fort Myers. Give us a highlight maybe from those days working through the levels of the minor leagues.
Jim Dwyer was my manager at Fort Wayne, and he was instrumental in how he approached me and how he would communicate with me. He was a very kind man. But at the same token, he gave clear instruction where you wanted to execute. You wanted to play for him. You wanted to win for him. You wanted to hustle for him. And so Jim Dwyer was a big part of my early career in professional ball.
Is there a particular at bat that is still vivid enough for you to walk us through it?
I can think of several. To be honest with you, it feels like and it's been a long time. I can still put myself back there, and I remember several games with the Fort Wayne Wizards. I'll share with you one moment. It was a Sunday afternoon game, 2:00 game time start. Beautiful day in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And we got to the end of the game where it was the bottom of an inning, and I remember there were 2 outs, and there was a runner on first and second, and I believe the game was 2-1. We were getting beat. And I remember walking up to the plate, thinking to myself, hey, the Lord's going to give me the strength to be a hero in this scenario, or he's going to give me the courage not to be one. And so that day, the Lord gave me the strength to get my bat head out on an inside fastball and drove the ball down the left field line. And the player scored easy from second base to tie the game at 2-2. And the runner on first base was running with 2 outs. So on the crack of the bat, the runner was off. And I could kind of see the whole scenario unfold as I was passing first base. The third base coach was waving the runner home, and the left fielder had thrown the ball to the shortstop. The shortstop was relaying it to the catcher, and the runner slid in the home plate. The catcher tagged him, and the umpire said safe. And the Fort Wayne Wizards won the game 3-2. And it was just an amazing moment. 6,000 to 7,000 people going nuts. And I remember standing at second base, just looking at the celebration, and it was just an amazing moment in time.
You saw all levels, certainly the much desired and much dreamt about cup of coffee with the big leaguers. How about those days? What are the memories that you take forth? Again, you were able to be around the likes of Kirby Puckett and those from those late 80s and early 90s teams that brought the Twins to prominence in the game of baseball. What were your takeaways from those days? What are your memories from those moments?
It was just very humbling. I remember when I was called in the big league camp, I was a catcher, so I was used and transported a lot to catch pitchers. And in spring training, there's a lot of pitchers, and there are a handful of catchers. And so because of my position, because I was a catcher, I was brought in the big league camp to catch because they needed more help to give their top guys rest. They would use the minor league guys to help take that load of bullpens and so on and so forth. And so, it was a very humbling experience to catch a Rick Aguilera who was just finite in his control and just had a phenomenal stuff. To catch a guy like Kevin Tapani and Scott Erickson, those guys were at the top of their game, and so I learned throughout my time of going from level to level, if it was A-ball to AAA spring training or the big league spring training, that every level the players would make each other look better. And that's what I learned from those guys. They were there to make not only themselves look good, but they were there to make you look good and make the team look good so that championship moments could be experienced. And so I just remember I was so humbled in how they were so dedicated in as a team to make one another look good. I learned a lot from Tom Kelly, the short amount of time that I had the opportunity to spend with him in spring training, and Dick Such was the pitching coach at that time. Learned a lot from him, and Ron Gardenhire was the third base coach, and so I learned a lot from him. And so I was just a sponge at that time, just picking up everything I could. My head was on a swivel. I was listening and taking notes and doing my best to get better. And so it was a dream come true. With we had split squads in spring training with the big league club, and I was on the split squad with Kirby Puckett and Chuck Knobloch and Scott Leyes and Gerald Clark, and just rubbing elbows with those guys for a short amount of time just really taught me a lot about um, being a better player. And then when I got into my coaching days, you're really how to connect with players and to be a better coach.
You cannot think Twins without thinking Tom Kelly. What's one lesson you did take from him that translated into your coaching days, which is where we're going next in this interview?
Well, he was a encouraging, very encouraging manager, and he very inspiring. You know, when he walked into the room, he owned that room. You know, you wanted to listen to what he had to say. He won championships at the highest level, and his coaching staff was the staffs that he put together on his coaching staffs were great team unity coaches, and they worked very well with the players. And so Tom Kelly was just a great manager. He was not only a great manager of the game of baseball, but he was a great manager of men. He was a great manager of coaches. He was a great manager of people. And so for a very short amount of time, you know, I just picked that up from him. He was really sold out on the techniques and the mechanics of the game of baseball, and he could just see it with his vision. He could see that a player being in proper position, having that proper mechanic in the batter's box or on the playing field, and so he really taught me a lot about earning respect and demanding respect with no words involved. And so Tom Kelly, it was a pleasure to the handful of times I had the opportunity for him to hit infield and for me to catch and put the ball to Tom Kelly was pretty neat for me.
You've talked about some of those individuals who shaped your later playing days and certainly your coaching days. Was there a specific moment where you realized coaching was what was going to be next for you?
Honestly, I never thought of that as a player. You know, I thought I was going to play for a long period of time. You know, I thought I was going to play for the rest of my life. And my playing tenure was cut a little short just through the number of players in the game at the time that I was released. And I had the opportunity to go overseas and play and just didn't feel peace about that. And so I hung up my spikes at a early age for myself. And honestly, I was kind of bitter at the game of baseball because I was in the best playing shape of my life physically. I thought I had the most information. The skills were sharp at that point of my career, and I thought I was on the incline instead of the decline. So I had a hard time with kind of retiring as a player at that time. And so it took a little school in the bottom of the Blue Ridge Mountains in South Carolina called North Greenville to pull me back into the game, helping me see that the game of baseball could be used for other things than just as a player.
Well, one of the things about baseball in your life when you trace it is it's taken you around the world. And you talk about some of those challenges and some of those difficulties and really some of the times where there's a lack of understanding or there's a process you have to work through. I said it a little bit earlier in the interview, but the storms and the weather that is outside is somewhat of a fitting soundtrack when we talk about working through some of those storms and working through some of those challenges that present themselves eventually as opportunities in life.
Through it all, through all the travels, I'm very thankful and blessed to have the opportunity to have that experience and to connect with cultures and to learn how to communicate with others in different ways, and how amazing it was that a game of baseball, when it was all said and done, united all the cultures, united all the different types of backgrounds. It was amazing that a game of baseball brought us all together. But it really helped me see how blessed I truly am. And at the same token, I learned so much from everyone I met along the path. Through the experiences of life, has the opportunity to teach, build up, or if you take advantage of it and your eyes are not open, you waste those moments. And so I'm so thankful that every trip that I was on, I was able to learn something, connect with something, and use that to do better in life.
Let me take you back to Felipe Alou Stadium in the Dominican Republic. No outfield fence. You're managing a game against teams from all around the country and internationally on that particular trip. It's going to lead us a little further into your coaching days. What's going through the mind of a head coach in a scenario like that that's even beyond the game of baseball itself?
Pretty crazy, and you were actually there with me, and it was a crazy moment. I could see how the players were kind of out of sort a little bit because they're thinking to themselves, where's the warning track? Where's the fence? How am I gonna, everything that I've been taught and what I'm used to, this ain't it. And so it really was a time to really lead the player and show the player and show the players and the team that, hey, this is a different experience, but the game of baseball hadn't changed. There's still a round ball and a round bat, and let's go do our best to play together and show off our skills and really get to know the people here in that scenario. But that was a different scenario with fans walking in the center field to get over to the stands and sometimes sitting right close to you. It was a different scenario.
What element of being a skipper most drew you in, intrigued you, and did you find most enjoyable?
I always loved to instruct and teach the game of baseball. Like Gaylord Perry taught me, like Dr. John Ward taught me, like Jim Dwyer taught me, like Tom Kelly taught me. I felt it as an overwhelming responsibility to pass those techniques and to pass that teaching and instruction on to the next generation. And so our fall semester, when we were not playing official games against other universities, other schools, really turned that into a spring training, into instruction and getting our players unified to understand the process and procedures and our language and how to control the game more and so on and so forth. So I really enjoyed the instruction. I really enjoyed the fall season of teaching the game of baseball with the players. In the spring was a little more difficult because as a head coach, you're not only dealing with some management of the game and some teaching of the game, but you're also dealing with a lot of administrative duties. And so it kind of took a little more away from the team and the players, and that's what I loved about coaching was being with the players and being right there with them on their hips.
Any particular environment that you coached in, or player or coach that you managed against that still stick out from across that coaching era of your life?
I have many, but the one that I think of when you ask that question was my very first year in college coaching. I came in December 12th of 1998 was when I was hired by North Greenville to take over the baseball program. Well, if you look at the calendar, December the 12th is actually in between semesters, in between the fall semester and the spring semester. And in baseball, in college baseball, your spring semester is your game time. That's your 56 game schedule. And so we had no fall season under my leadership. And so I came in to a possibly a difficult situation and only had a couple of weeks to interview players and get to know players. And then when the new year arrived, 1999, had a couple more weeks to get the whole team ready for the playing season. And so instead of having, 3 or 4 months to prepare through a proper fall season, we literally, had a handful of weeks. And I tell you, I'm very, very proud of the guys that hung with me that spring of 1999. We started out with over 30-something players, and we ended up with 16 players at the end of the season. It was a monumental time for North Greenville College baseball because it was the first time in the history of North Greenville baseball that the baseball team was able to go to the regions. And so for the first time in school history, we went as a 4-year school to the regions. And we did it with 16 players that learned how to band together a very short amount of time and accomplished some pretty amazing championship moments.
Well, that certainly has to stand out among these. I'm going to ask you now, 10 years of college coaching. What are the things of which you're most proud or most grateful for during that period?
Well, the relationship with the players. I received a phone call just a couple days ago from one of my former pitchers, Matt Marone, and he just called and said, "Hey, Coach, man, just was thinking about you. Want to ask you to pray for me, and just want to say hello to you." And he has a wife and beautiful kids now, and just to see how the Matt Marone and the Andy Rogers and the Josh Osbornes, and I can just go on, Joe Bridges and Matt Rollins, and I can just go on and on and on with the players that are just showing out in the game of life right now. They're great fathers, amazing husbands, and just really making a positive impact in whatever community they're in. We've got several baseball coaches out there. They're head coaches of programs that are running similar programs that we ran at North Greenville. We've got principals, we've got teachers, we've got police officers. They're all spread out throughout the communities that they live in, and making a huge difference in their personal life and their professional life. And it's just an honor to connect with the players over my tenure, and to continue to have relationships with them well after they have left the game of baseball.
Step back in time with me. Let's fill out the lineup card. Not specifically with names, but with the individual characteristics you would like to have in each spot in the order.
In the leadoff spot, I always wanted one of my best hitters to be up in the leadoff spot. I wanted that hitter to have speed, be able to run a little bit. And so I always like my best hitter, one of my best hitters to be in the leadoff spot, and my other best hitter to be in the third slot. And so I like, it's probably against traditional baseball nowadays, but I like my two-hole slot guy. I liked him to be able to be really good with the baseball bat. I didn't like him striking out. That he had a good eye for the ball, and he made contact, so he could do a hit and run, he could do a bunt and run, he could do a sacrifice. He was just really good with the baseball bat. So I like my number one guy to be a really good, one of the best hitters on the team and have some speed. My two guy, I like for him to be able to handle the bat well, and to not strike out that often, to be able to put the ball in play more times than none. The third guy was probably my another great hitter on the team, if not the best, the second best, and he was able to handle the bat well. My four guy, if I had a guy that could put the ball in the alleys or over the fence, I remember a guy right now, probably one of my best four-hole hitters, Tom Gardner, led North Greenville baseball for many years in home runs and career-wise, and he was a great four guy. He was able to hit the alleys for doubles and able to hit the ball to the fence. He was a good RBI guy. My five-hole guy, I always like to have another RBI guy in the five slot, guy that could maybe go for the fences or in the alleys. And then my sixth guy, I like to start the lineup over again. So, I like that sixth guy to maybe have some speed and to kind of be my second best leadoff hitter to be in that sixth slot. The seventh slot, once again, I'd be looking for a guy that could make some contact just to put the ball in play, so we can kind of move the runners around, kind of put the pressure back on the opponent by doing another hit and run or a bunt and run or a sacrifice or something. Then my eight guy was normally a guy that was learning how to really be an offensive player, but we needed that person in the lineup for whatever reason. And then my nine guy, I'm looking for another possible leadoff hitter to be in that hole. So that was just my philosophy in putting the lineup together.
Quite a lineup you have behind you there, too. I see those bats lined up right behind you. Take one or two of those down, or at least point in that direction, and give us a battle wound or two that they have in their history.
Over my left shoulder is some of my minor league wood, and actually have some streaks on those bats, some of the streaks that I had, some of the great streaks that I had in minor league ball, not the slumps. I had some slumps, too, don't get me wrong, but I don't have any slumps on the wall. But some of the streaks that I had, maybe some game-winning RBIs, game-winning hits, some of those bats are behind me. Some of my big league wood that I was able to connect with when I was in big league camp. is behind me as well. And then over my right shoulder, you'll see some Mother's Day bats. As I mentioned earlier in our interview, my mom was a very inspirational person in my life that really encouraged and loved on me throughout my ups and downs in the game of baseball, my struggles. And so a tribute to my mom, Mother's Day bats. They're the pink bats over my right shoulder. And then you got some fungo bats back there too, over my left shoulder, some fungo bats and some technique tools in training over my left shoulder as well. So there's a little montage back there, a little bit of everything.
Your position was catcher. You enjoyed that spot, your perspective on life, so much of it coming from being in that role. When you reflect upon the role of a catcher as a part of being the makeup of Tim Nihart, what do you think being a catcher taught you? What do you look back at as your time as a catcher and say, that's why I love that position so much? Just describe the catching position for us all the way around.
Well, for me, the catching position, really, and believe me, I really didn't become a catcher until my freshman year in college, believe it or not. And so I did some catching in high school. My brother was a left-handed pitcher, and nobody ever wanted to catch him because he threw the ball pretty well. And so whenever he pitched, I caught. And that's just the way I kind of started to catch in high school. When there was a pitcher on the mound that nobody wanted to catch, they put me back there. And so I kind of learned a little bit in high school. But then when I got to college, Gaylord taught me more about catching, and then I started to learn more and more about the catching. And one of the things that I learned and what I liked about the catching position was the catcher is the only player on the field that's looking the opposite direction than all the other defensive players. And so the catcher's looking out, and they can see all the defensive players. They can see the third baseman, the left fielder, center fielder, shortstop, second base, right field, first base, pitcher. They see it all, and so they see all the angles. And so just having that really taught me of that expanding of the vision, to always keep the vision in between the playing field, but always keep the vision on your teammates. And because of the perspective of a catcher, the catcher always has the opportunity to encourage, support, and direct and instruct the other players on the field because they see it all. And so the catching position taught me a lot over the journey with signal calling, with positioning, with effective communication. So a lot of the techniques that I learned as a catcher, I've been able to use in the game of life to build teams, connect with teams, effectively communicate with teams, and to guide teams along the way. I also learned being a catcher that sometimes you got to turn your back on the audience, and I learned that as a leader, as a catcher. A lot of times your audience is behind you, and sometimes they're way down the left field line, right field line, and maybe in the decks in center field. But I learned along the way in leadership that sometimes, in a very respectful way, a very humbling way, you got to turn your back on the crowd and keep your nose and keep your eyes to the plow.
Great lessons all the way around. Looking back over this incredible journey that has been the life of Tim Nihart, when all is said and done, how do you hope as a player, as a coach, as a brother, as a son, as a husband, as an individual, Tim Nihart is remembered?
Well, I hope that I'm remembered as someone that was available, that was approachable, that was present, and someone that always did his very best to become a master of meeting the people's needs. And so I hope along the journey, somehow, some way, I produced and exported speaking life to the people. And so those are some of the characteristics that I hope that I'm getting better at every day. And I hope when my life journey is done here on this earth, that I'll be remembered by in a small way.